4.
So in case you didn't hear, I cannot directly post on Facebook Live for 28 days because I was a bad boy. And
I'd like to know. I'm
yeah,
so curious.
well, I used a historical quote from Mussolini, and they didn't like that.
Really?
Yeah, it was the one where he equates fascism with corporatism.
Wow.
Yeah.
28 days, huh?
Yep. But
All right.
we'll work around that. We'll work around that.
It sort of reflects the world we're living in nowadays, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does.
Got to be
because
careful with your P's and Q's.
Well, you know what? If I ever quote a historical bad guy again, I will misspell their name.
Maybe that's enough.
I might go Ben Musso, and I'm sure it would have. I'm sure it would have passed with no problem. The problem was that I used a bad guy's name.
The thing is, it's a critical censorship. It's just a critical, we don't take the context into consideration. So I think it's the worst kind of censorship in a way, but yeah, okay, there you go.
But it's being done by machines.
It's done by machines. So this is like a good
Artificial
example of one type of problem that's going to happen with AI.
Oh yeah.
Because the bots will make decisions, and then there'll be, unless the politicians finally decide to do something, there'll be no real appeal that you can make. There's no one to reason with. So anyway,
can I tell Duncan a small side story that sort of illustrates this point?
Sure.
Before I retired, I worked in the Irish government, and my boss told me that I needed to be careful that all our phones were bugged by the British. And I was sort of questioning, well, how could they sort of monitor all the phone calls that were being made out of government buildings? And he explained to me that in GCHQ in Cheltenham, they had keywords such as IRA, Margaret Thatcher, stuff like that. And their machinery would fix on those and zone in on those conversations. So it's an earlier edition of what has happened to you.
Yeah.
But I didn't get a 28-day ban.
They didn't dock your pay, and
I got paid. Yeah.
I test out Alexa for a laugh ever since I installed it in the house. When my two sons were here, to give them a laugh, and I just say, Alexa, terrorism, Al Qaeda, pedophile, and all these keywords. And I say, let's wait and see, lads, do we hear from them? Well, thankfully. Haven't yet.
Yes, I don't think Alexa is as narrow-minded as Facebook.
No one is as narrow-minded as Facebook, and there we go. I get banned too, but
okay. Well, now that we've done our best to badmouth Facebook, and let me say that this recording of today's reading is actually being originally posted on YouTube because Facebook is not letting me post directly for a while. And so still, eventually we'll get this on Facebook, and this is for those of you who will be listening to it in the future. And we're going to continue with our reading of Molly Bloom and Penelope. And as we mentioned before, we're just going to take our time. We're going to remember that Molly's in kind of a daze. It's very, very late at night. She's going in and out of reverie, going up and down in various emotions. And some of it will be quick because she'll get angry about something, and other things will be very lazy. That said, on we go. Yes. I think he made him a bit firmer, sucking on him so long he made me thirsty titties, he calls them. I had to laugh. Yes, this one, anyhow. Stiff, the nipple gets for the least thing. I'll get him to keep that up. And I'll take, the nipple gets the least thing. I'll get him to keep that up, and I'll take those eggs beaten with Marcella, fatten them out for him till they're all those veins and things curious the way it's made. 2, the same as in the case of twins. They're supposed to represent beauty placed up there like those statues in the museum, one of them pretending to hide it with her. And are they so beautiful? Of course. Compared to what a man looks like with his 2 bags full and his other thing hanging down there out of him, or sticking up at you like a hat rack. No wonder they hide it with a cabbage leaf. That disgusting Cameron Highlander behind the meat market. And that other wretch with the red head behind the tree where the statue of the fish used to be. When I was passing, pretending he was pissing, standing out for me to see it with his baby clothes up to one side, the Queen's own. You're a nice lot. It's well the Surreys relieve them. They're always trying to show it to you every time. Nearly I passed outside the men's greenhouse near Harcourt Street Station just try some fellow or other trying to catch my eye as if it were one of the 7 wonders of the world. Ah, and the stink of those rotten places. The night coming home with Poldy after the Comfortfords party, oranges and lemonade to make you feel nice and watery. I went in to one of them. It was so biting cold, I couldn't keep it. When it was that 93, the canal was frozen. Yes, it was a few months after that. After a pity, a couple of Camerons weren't there to see me squatting in the men's place, Madero. I tried to draw a picture of it before I tore it up like a sausage or something. Next, please.
I wonder they're not afraid of going about, of getting a kick or a bang or something there. And that word met sometimes with hoses in it. And he came out with some jawbreakers about the incarnation he never can explain. A thing simply the way a body can understand. Then he goes and burns the bottom out of the pan, all for his kidney. This one, not so much. There's the mark of his teeth, still where he tried to bite the nipple. I had to scream out, aren't they fearful, trying to hurt you? I had a great breast of milk with Millie, enough for 2. What was the reason of that, he said. I could have got £1 a week as a wet nurse, all swelled out the morning, that delicate-looking student that stopped in number 28 with the citrones Penrose nearly caught me washing through the window, only for I snapped up the towel to my face. That was his studenting hurt me they used to weaning her till he got Dr. Brady to give me the belladonna prescription. I had to get him to suck them. They were so hard. He said it was sweeter and thicker than cows. Then he wanted to milk me into the tea. Well, he's beyond everything, I declare. Somebody ought to put him in the budget. If I only could remember the 1/2 of the things and write a book of it in the words of Master Poldy, yes. And it's so much smoother, the skin, much an hour he was at them. I'm sure by the clock, like some kind of big infant, I had at me, they want everything in their mouth. All the pleasure those men get out of a woman. I can feel his mouth. Oh Lord, I must stretch myself. I wished he was here or somebody to let myself go with and come again. Like that, I feel all fire inside me. Or if I could dream it, when he made me spend the second time tickling me behind with his finger. I was coming for about 5 minutes with my legs around him. I had to hug him. After, oh Lord, I wanted to shout out all sorts of things, fuck or shit or anything at all, only not to look ugly, or those lines from The Strain, who knows the way he'd take it. You want to feel your way with a man. They're not all like him, thank God. Some of them want you to be nice about it. I noticed the contrast he does and doesn't tug. I gave my eyes that look with my hair a bit loose from the tumbling, and my tongue between my lips up to him, the savage brute. Thursday, Friday, 1 Saturday, 2 Sunday, 3, oh Lord, I can't wait till Monday. Next, please.
Vroom, train. Somewhere whistling with strength, those engines have it in them, like big giants, and the water rolling all over and out of them, all sides, like the end of love's sweet song. The poor men that have to be out all night from their wives and families in those roasting engines. Stifling. It was today. I'm glad I burnt the half of those Freemans and photo bits, leaving things like that lying around. He's getting very careless. And threw some of them up in the WC. I'll get him to cut them tomorrow. I'll get him to cut them tomorrow for me, instead of having them there for the next year to get a few pence for them. Having him asking, whereas last January's paper and all those old overcoats I bundled out of the hall, making the place hotter than it is. That rain was lovely and refreshing just after my beauty sleep. Thought it was going to get like Gibraltar. My goodness, the heat there before Laventer came on. Black as night and the glare of the rocks standing up in it like a big giant compared to their 3 rock mountain. They think is so great with the red sentries here and there, the poplars, and they all white hot, and the smell of the rainwater in those tanks, watching the sun all the time, weltering down on you, faded all those lovely frocks. Father's friend, Mrs. Stanhope, sent me from the Bee Marsh, Paris. What a shame, my dearest Doggerina, she wrote on it. She was very nice. What's this? Her other name was. Just a PC to tell you. I sent a little present. Have just had a jolly warm bath and feel very clean. Dog now enjoyed it. A wogger, she called him. Wogger. We'd give anything to be back in Jib. And here you sing, waiting on an old Madrid concoin is the name of those exercises he bought me. One of those new some word I couldn't make out. Shawls, amusing things, but tear for the least thing. Still, they're lovely. I don't think you will always think of the lovely teas we had together. Scrumptious currant scones and raspberry wafers. I adore well now, dearest Doggerina. Be sure and write soon. Kind, she left out regards to your father. Also, Captain Grove, with love, yours, aptly, Esther. XXX. She didn't look a bit married, just like a girl. He was years older than her. Wogger. He was awfully fond of me when he held down the wire with his foot for me to step over at the bullfight in La Lina. where the matador gourmets was given the bull's ear. These clothes we have to wear. Whoever invented them, expecting you to walk up Killiney Hill. Then the example. At that picnic, all stayed up. Can't do a blessed thing in them. And the crowd run and jump out of the way. Next.
That's why I was afraid when that other ferocious old bull began to charge the banderillos with the sashes and the two things in their hats, and the brutes of men shouting, "Bravo, Toro." Sure, the women were as bad in their nice white mantillas, ripping all the whole insides out of those poor horses. I never heard of such a thing in all my life. Yes, he used to break his heart at me taking off the dog, barking in Bell Lane, poor brute. And it's sick. What became of them ever? I suppose they're dead long ago, the two of them. It's like all through a mist. Makes you feel so old. I made the scones, of course. I had everything all to myself. Then girl Hester we used to compare our hair. Mine was thicker than hers. She showed me how to settle it at the back when I put it up. And what's this? How else to make a knot on a thread with the one hand? We were like cousins. What age was I then? The night of the storm, I slept in her bed. She had her arms around me. Then we were fighting in the morning with the pillow. What fun. He was watching me whenever he got an opportunity at the band on the Alameda Esplanade when I was with Father and Captain Grove. I looked up at the church first, and then at the windows, then down, and our eyes met. I felt something go through me like all needles. My eyes were dancing. I remember after, when I looked at myself in the glass, hardly recognized myself. The change, I had a splendid skin from the sun, and the excitement like a rose. Next, please.
I didn't get a wink of sleep. It wouldn't have been nice on account of her, but I could have stopped it in time. She gave me the Moonstone to read. That was the first I read of Wilkie Collins. East Lynne, I read, and The Shadow of Ashley Diet, Mrs. Henry Wood, Henry Dunbar, by that other woman. I lent him afterwards with Mulvey's photo in it. So as he see, I wasn't without an. And Lord Lytton, Eugene Aram, Molly Bawn she gave me, by Mrs. Hungerford, on account of the name. I don't like books with the Molly in them, like that one he brought me about the one from Flanders, a whore, always shoplifting anything she could, cloth and stuff, and yards of it. This blanket is too heavy on me. That's better. I haven't even one decent nightdress. This thing gets all rolled up under me. Besides him and his fooling, that's better. I used to be weltering then in the heat, my shift drenched with the sweat, stuck in the cheeks of my bottom on the chair. When I stood up, they were so fattish and firm. When I got up on the sofa cushions to see, with my clothes up and the bugs, tons of them at night, and the mosquito nets, I couldn't read a line. Lord, how long ago it seems, centuries. Of course, they never come back. And she didn't put her address right on it either. She may have noticed her Wugger people were always going away, and we never. I remember that day with the waves and the boats with their high heads rocking and the swell of the ship, those officers' uniforms on shore. Leave, made me seasick. He didn't say anything. He was very serious. I had the high buttoned boots on and my skirt was blowing. She kissed me 6 or 7 times. Didn't I cry? Yes. I believe I did, or near it. My lips were teetering when I said goodbye. Next, please.
She had a gorgeous wrap of some special kind of blue color on her for the voyage, made very peculiarly to one side like, and it was extremely pretty. It got as dull as the devil after they went. I was almost planning to run away, mad out of it, somewhere where never easy, where we, our father or aunt or marriage, waiting, always waiting to guide him to me, waiting nor speed his flying feet were damn guns bursting and booming all over the shop, especially the Queen's birthday, and throwing everything down in all directions. If you didn't open the windows when General Ulysses Grant, whoever he was or did, supposed to be some great fellow, landed off the ship, and an old Sprague, the consul, that was there from before the flood, dressed up, poor man, and he in mourning for the sun, then the same old bugles for a veil in the morning and drums rolling, and the unfortunate poor devils of the soldiers walking about with mastings smelling the place more than the old long bearded Jews in their jellybes and Levites assembly, and sound clear and gunfire for the men to cross the lines, and the warden marching with his keys to lock the gates, and the bagpipes, and only Captain Groves and father talking about Rorke's Drift and Plevna. Next.
And Sir Garnet Wolseley and Gordon at Khartoum, lighting their pipes for them every time they went out. Drunken old devil with his grog on the windowsill. Catch him leaving any of it. Picking his nose, trying to think of some other dirty story to tell up in a corner. But he never forgot himself when I was there, sending me out of the room on some blind excuse, paying his compliments, the Bushwell's whiskey talking, of course. But he'd do the same to the next woman that came along. I suppose he died of galloping drink ages ago. The days like years, not a letter from a living soul, except the odd few I posted to myself with bits of paper in them. So bored sometimes I could fight with my nails, listening to that old Arab with the one eye and his hias of an instrument singing his hia, 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 all my compliments on your hotchpotch of your hias. As bad as now, with the hands hanging off me, looking out of the window. If there was a nice fellow, even in the opposite house, that medical in Hollis Street, the nurse was after, when I put up my gloves and hat at the window to show I was going out. Not a notion what I meant. Aren't they thick? Never understand what you say. Even you'd want to print it up on a big poster for them, not even if you shake hands twice with the left. He didn't recognize me either when I half frowned at him outside Westland Road Chapel. Next.
Where does their intelligence come in? I'd like to know. Gray matter, they have it all in their tail, if you ask me. Those country gougers up in the city arms intelligence, they have a damn sight less than the bulls and cows they were selling the meat in the coalman's bell. That noisy bugger trying to swindle me with the wrong bill he took out of his hat. What a pair of paws and pots and pans and kettles to mend any broken bottles for a poor man today, and no visitors or post ever except his checks or some advertisement like that wonder worker they sent him addressed to Dear Madame. Only his letter and the card from Millie this morning. See, she wrote to me. She wrote to him. Who did I get the last letter from? Oh, Mrs. Dwen. Now that what possessed her to write from Canada after so many years to know the recipe I had for Pisto Madrileño. Chloe Dillon, since she wrote to say she was married to her very rich architect. If I'm to believe all I hear, with a villa and 8 rooms. Her father was an awfully nice man. He was nearly 70, always good-humored. Well now, Miss Tweedy or Miss Gillespie, there's a panner that was solid silver coffee service he had too on the mahogany sideboard, then dying so far away. I hate people that have always their poor story to tell. Everybody has his own troubles. That poor Nancy Blake died a month ago of acute pneumonia. Well, I didn't know her so well as all that. She was Chloe's friend more than mine, poor Nancy. It's a bother having to answer. He always tells me the wrong things and no stops to say, like making a speech or sad bereavement sympathy. I always made that mistake. And nephew with W's, and I hope he'll write me a long letter the next time if it's a thing. He really likes me. Oh, thanks be to the great God, I got somebody to give me what I badly wanted, to put some heart up into me. You've no chances at all in this place like you used a long time ago. I wish somebody would write me a love letter. His wasn't much, and I told him he could write what he liked. Yours ever, Hugh Boylan. In the old Madrid stuff, silly woman, believe love is sighing, I am dying. Still, he wrote it. Next, please.
Still, if he wrote it, I suppose there'd be some truth in it, true or no. It fills up your whole day, and life is always something to think about every moment and see it all around you like a new world. I could write the answer in bed. Let him imagine me short, just a few words, not those long cross letters Attorney Dillon used to write to the fellow. There was something in the four courts that jilted her. After out of the lady's letter writer, when I told her to say a few simple words, he could twist how he liked, not acting with precipitancy, with equal candor. Of greatest earthly happiness, answer to a gentleman's proposal affirmatively. My goodness, there's nothing else in all. Very fine for them. But as for being a woman, as soon as you're old, they might as well throw you out in the bottom of an ash pit. Mulvey's was the first. When I was in bed that morning and Mrs. Rubio brought it in with the coffee. She stood there standing when I asked her to hand me, and I pointed at them. I couldn't think of a word, a hairpin to open it, and with a horquilla, disobliging old thing, and it stared her in the face with her switch of false hair on her, and vain about her appearance, ugly as she was near 80 or 100, her face a mass of wrinkles, with all her religion domineering, because she never could get over the Atlantic fleet coming in. Half the ships in the world, and the Union Jack flying with all her carabineros, because 4 drunken English sailors took all the rock from them, and because I couldn't run into Mass often enough to Santa Maria to please her with her shawl up on her, except when there was a marriage on with all her miracles of the saints, and her black blessed Virgin with the silver dress, and the sun dancing 3 times on Easter Sunday morning. And when the priest was going by with the bell ringing, the Vatican to the dime, blessing herself for his Majestad, and admirer he signed it. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I wanted to pick him up when I saw him follow me along the Calle Real in the shop window. Then he tipped me just in passing. But I never thought he'd write making an appointment. I had it inside my petticoat bodice all day, reading it up in every hole and corner while Father was at the drill, instructing to find out by the handwriting of the language of stamps, singing, I remember, shall I wear a white rose? I want to put on the old stupid clock to hear my name. He was the first man kissed me under the Moorish wall. My sweetheart. When a boy, it never entered my head what kissing meant, till he put his tongue in my mouth. His mouth was sweet like young. I put my knee up to him a few times to learn the way. What did I tell him? I was engaged for fun to the son of the Spanish nobleman named Don Miguel de la Flora, and he believed me that I was to be married to him in 3 years' time. Next, please.
There's many a true word spoken in jest. There is a flower that bloometh. Few things I told him true about myself. Just for him to be imagining the Spanish girls he didn't like, I suppose. One of them wouldn't have him. I got him excited. He crushed all the flowers on my bosom. He brought me, he couldn't count the pesetas and the perigordas till I caught him. Capaquin, he came from, he said, on the Blackwater. But it was too short then, the day before he left. May, yes, it was May, when the infant king of Spain was born. I'm always like that in the spring. I'd like a new fellow every year on the tip-top under the rock gun near O'Hara's tower. I told him it was struck by lightning and all about the old Barbary apes they sent to Clapham without a tail careering all over the show on each other's back. Mrs. Rubio said she was a regular old rock scorpion, robbing the chickens out of the Inces farm and throw stones at you if you were a near. He was looking at me. I had that white blouse on, open at the front, to encourage him as much as I could, without too openly. They were just beginning to be plump. I said I was tired. We lay over the fir tree cove, a wild place, I suppose. It must be the highest rock in existence. The galleries and casemates and those frightful rocks and St. Michael's Cave, with the icicles or whatever they called them hanging down, and ladders, all the mud plotching in my boots. I'm sure that's the way down the monkeys go under the sea to Africa when they die. The ships out far like chips. That was the Malta boat passing, yes. The sea and the sky, you could do what you liked, lie there forever. He caressed them outside. They love doing that. It's the roundness there. I was leaning over him with my white rice straw hat to take the newness out of it. The left side of my face, the best, my blouse open for his last day, transparent kind of shirt he had. I could see his chest pink. He wanted to touch mine with his for a moment, but I wouldn't let him. He was awfully put out first, for fear you never know consumption, or leave me with a child embarazada. That old servant Inez told me that one drop, even if it got into you at all, after I tried with the banana, but I was afraid it might break and get lost up in me somewhere. Yes, because they once took something down out of a woman that was up there for years, covered with lime salts. They're all mad to get in there. Where they come out of you'd think they could never get far enough up. And then they're done with you, in a way, till the next time. Yes, because there's a wonderful feeling there all the time. So tender. How did we finish it off? Yes. Oh, yes. I pulled him off into my handkerchief, pretending not to be excited, but I opened my legs. I wouldn't let him touch me inside my petticoat. I had a skirt opening up the side. I tortured the life out of him, tickling him. I loved rousing that dog in the hotel, wrist a walk, a walk, a walk. His eyes shut and a bird flying below us. He was shy all the same. I liked that morning. I made him blush a little when I got over him that way, when I unbuttoned him and took his out and drew back the skin. It had a kind of eye in it. They're all buttons, men down the middle on the wrong side of them. Molly, darling, he called me. What was his name? Jack, Joe, Harry, Mulvey, was it? Yes, I think a lieutenant. He was rather fair. He had a laughing kind of voice. So I went around to the everything was moustache. He said, he'd come back. Lord, it's just like yesterday to me. And if I was married, he'd do it to me. And I promised him, yes, faithfully, I'd let him block me now, flying perhaps. Perhaps he's dead or killed or a captain or admiral. It's nearly 20 years if I said Fir Tree Cove. He would if he came up behind me and put his hands over my eyes to guess who I might recognize him. He's young, still about 40. Perhaps he married some girl on the Blackwater and is quite changed. They all do. They haven't half the character of a woman, as she little knows what I did with her beloved husband before he ever dreamt of her in broad daylight too, in the sight of the whole world, you might say. They could have put an article about it in the Chronicle. I was a bit wild after when I blew out the old bag the biscuits were in from Benadi Bros and exploded it. Lord, what a bang. All the woodcocks and pigeons screaming, coming back the same way that we went over Middle Hill round by the old guardhouse and the Jews' burial place, pretending to read out the Hebrew on them. I wanted to fire his pistol, he said. He hadn't one. He didn't know what to make of me with his peak cap on that. He always wore crooked as often as I settled it straight. HMS Calypso, swinging my hat, that old bishop that spoke off the altar. His long preach about women's higher functions, about girls now riding the bicycle and wearing peak caps, and the new woman bloomers. God sent him sense and me more money, I suppose they're called after him. Never thought that would be my name, Bloom. When I used to write it in print to see how it looked on a visiting card or practicing for the butcher and oblige M. Bloom, you're looking blooming, Josie used to say after I married him. Well, it's better than Breen or Briggs, those Brig, or those awful names with bottom in them. Next, please.
Mrs. Ramsbottom, or some other kind of a bottom. Mulvey, I wouldn't go mad about either, or suppose I divorced him. Mrs. Boylan, my mother, whoever she was, might have given me a nicer name. The Lord knows, after a lovely one she had, Luita Laredo. The fun we had running along Willis Road to Europa Point, twisting in and out all round the other side of Jersey. They were shaking and dancing out in my blouse like Millie's little ones. Now when she runs up the stairs, I loved looking down at them. I was jumping up the pepper trees and the white poplars, pulling the leaves off and throwing them at him. He went to Indus. He was to write the voyage those men have to make to the ends of the world and back. It's the least they might get a squeeze or two at a woman while they can, going out to be drowned or blown up somewhere. I went up Windmill Hill to the flats that Sunday morning with Captain Rubios. That was dead spyglass, like the sentry he had. He said he'd have one or two from on board. I wore that frock from the Beaumarchais, Paris, and the coral necklace, the straits shining. I could see over to Morocco, almost Bay of Tangier. Why, Tangier white, and the Atlas Mountains with snow on it, and the straits like the river so clear. Harry Molly, darling, I was thinking of him on the sea. All the time at Mass, while my petticoat began to slip down at the elevation. Weeks and weeks I kept the handkerchief under my pillow for the smell of him. There was no decent perfume to be got in that Gibraltar, only that cheap Eau Espagne. That faded and left a stink on you more than anything else. I wanted to give him a memento. He gave me a clumsy cladder ring for luck that I gave him Gardner going to South Africa, where those Boers killed him with their war and fever, but they were well beaten all the same, as if it brought bad luck with it, like an opal or a pearl. Still, it must have been pure 18-karat gold, because it was heavy. But what could you get in place like that? The sand frog sure from Africa, and that derelict ship that came up to the harbour. The Mari, what do you call it? No, he hadn't a moustache. That was Gardner. Yes, I see his face. Cleve Shuren. For that train again, weeping tone once in the dear decad days begone call. Close my eyes beneath my lips, forward kiss, and look eyes open, piano. Ere over the world the mists began. I hate the inns beg. Comes love, sweet song. Next.
I have lost my place completely. Could the next person go ahead?
I'll let that out full when I get in front of the footlights again. Kathleen Carney and her lot of squealers. Missed this, missed that, missed the other. Lot of sparrow farts skitting around talking about politics. They know as much about as my backside. Anything in the world to make themselves some way interesting. Irish, homemade, beauties. Soldier's daughter, am I? And whose are you, bootmakers and publicans? I beg your pardon, coach. I thought you were a wheelbarrow. They'd die down dead off their feet if they ever got a chance of walking down the Alameda on an officer's arm like me. On the band night, my eyes flash, my bust that they haven't passion, God help their poor head. I knew more about men and life when I was 15 than they'll all know at 50. They don't know how to sing a song like that, Gardner said. No man could look at my mouth and teeth smiling like that and not think of it. I was afraid he mightn't like my accent. First, he's so English. All father left me in spite of his stamps. I've my mother's eyes and figure. Anyhow, he always said they're so snotty about themselves, some of those cads. He wasn't a bit like that. He was dead gone on my lips. Let them get a husband first. That's fit to be looked at, and a daughter like mine, or see if they can excite a swell with money that can pick and choose whoever he wants, like Boylan to do it 4 or 5 times, locked in each other's arms, or The Voice either. I could have been a prima donna, only I married him. Comes love's old deep down chin back, not too much, make it double. My lady's bower is too long for an encore. Next, please.
Brendan, did you find
Yeah.
it? Yeah. So
I did, thank you. Okay, so where am I now? My lady's bower is too long for an encore, about the moated grange at twilight and vaulted rooms. Yes, I'll sing winds that blow from the south that he gave after the choir stairs performance. I'll change that lace on my black dress to show off my bubs, and yes, by God, I'll get that big fan mended, make them burst with envy. My hole is itching me always when I think of him. I feel some wind in me. Better go easy now, wake him. Have him at it again, slobbering after washing every bit of myself, back, belly and sides. If we had even a bath itself or my own room anyway, I wish he'd sleep in some bed by himself with his cold feet on me. Give us room even to let a fart, God, or to do the least thing better. Yes, hold them like that, a bit on my side, piano quietly squee. There's that train far away, pianissimo, E, one more song. That was a relief, wherever you be, let your wind go free. Who knows if that pork chop I took of my cup of tea after was quite good with the heat. I couldn't smell anything off it. I'm sure that queer-looking man in the pork butcher's is a great rogue. Next, please.
So, Laurie?
Sorry. I hope that lamp is not smoking. Fill my nose up with smuts. Better than having him leaving the gas on all night. I couldn't rest easy in my bed in Gibraltar, even getting up to see why I am so damned nervous about that. Though I like it in the winter. It's more company. Oh Lord, it was rotten cold too that winter. When I was only about 10, was I? Yes. I had the big doll with all the funny clothes dressing her up and undressing, that icy wind skeeting across from those mountains. The something Nevada, Sierra Nevada, standing at my fire with a little bit of a short shift I had up to heat myself. I loved dancing about in it, then make a race back into bed. I'm sure that fellow opposite used to be there the whole time, watching with the lights out in the summer, and I in my skin hopping around. I used to love myself when stripped at the washstand, dabbing and creaming. Only when it came to the chamber performance, I put out the light too. So then there were two of us. Goodbye to my sleep for this night, anyhow. I hope he's not going to get in with those medical leading him astray to imagine he's young again, coming it at 4 in the morning. It must be, if not more. Still, he had the manners not to wake me. Next.
What do they find to gabber about all night, squandering money and getting drunker and drunker? Couldn't they drink water? Then he starts giving us his orders for eggs and tea and Findon Haddie and hot butter toast. I suppose we'll have him sitting up like the king of the country, pumping the wrong end of the spoon up and down in his egg, whenever he's learned that from. And I love to hear him falling up the stairs of a morning with the cups rattling on the tray, and then play with the cat. She rubs up against you for her own sake. I wonder how she flees. She's as bad as a woman, always licking and lecking. I hate their claws. I wonder, do they see anything that we can't, staring like that? When she sits at the top of the stairs so long and listening, as I wait always. What a robber, too. That lovely fresh place I bought, I think I'll get a bit of fish tomorrow. Or today, is it Friday? Yes, I will, with some blancmange with black currant jam, just like long ago. Not those 2-pound pots of mixed plum and apple from the London and Newcastle Williams and Woods. Goes twice as far, only for the bones. I hate those eels. Cod, yes, I'll get a nice piece of cod. I'm always getting enough for 3, forgetting. Anyway, I'm sick of that everlasting butcher's meat from Buckley's loin chops and leg beef and rib steak and scrag of mutton and calf's pluck. The very name is enough. Next, please.
Or a picnic, suppose we all gave 5 shillings each and or let him pay it and invite some other woman for him. Who? Mrs. Fleming, and drove out to the Furry Glen or the strawberry beds. We'd have him examining all the horses' toenails first, like he does with the letters. No, not with Boylan there. Yes, with some cold veal and ham mix sandwiches. There are little houses down at the bottom of the banks there on purpose, but it's hot as blazes. He says not a bank holiday anyhow. I hate those ruck of Mary Ann coal boxes out for the day. Whit Monday is a curse day, too. No wonder. No wonder that bee bit him. Better the seaside, but I'd never again in this life get into a boat with him after him at Bray telling the boatman he knew how to row. If anyone asked, could he ride a steeplechase for the Gold Cup, he'd say yes. Then it came on to get the rough old thing crookeding about and the weight all down my side telling me to pull the right reins now, pull the left, and the tide all swamping in the floods through the bottom, and his oars slipping out of the stirrup. It's a mercy we weren't all drowned. He can swim, of course. Me, there's no danger whatsoever. Keep yourself calm in his flannel trousers. I'd like to have a tatter them down off him before all the people and give him what one calls flagellate till he was black and blue, do him all the good in the world, only for the long-nosed chap. I don't know who he is, but that other beauty, Burke, out of the City Arms Hotel, there was spying around as usual on the slip, always where he wasn't wanted, if there was a row on. You'd vomit a better face. There was no love lost between us, that's one consolation. I wonder what kind is that book he brought me, Sweets of Sin by a Gentleman of Fashion, some other Mr. de Kock. I suppose the people gave him that nickname, going about with his tube from one woman to another. I couldn't even change my new white shoes all ruined with the salt water, and the hat I had with the feather all blowy and tossed on me. How annoying and provoking, because the smell of the sea excited me, of course. Sardines and the bream of Catalan Bay around the back of the rock, they were all fine. They were fine, all silver in fishermen's baskets. Old Luigi, near 100, they said, came from Genoa, and the tall old chap with earrings. Next, please.
Okay, next will be next week.
Oh, okay.
So let's mark that, let's mark this space here, and we're gonna be into May, so I guess it's, what, the 4th of May? 4th, 23, and, let me get page numbers. So Gabler's gonna be 629. Wordsworth, somebody have Wordsworth?
Bodley Head is 629.
Bodley, 629 also, okay. No Wordsworth out there? Okay, I'll look.
No, not this week, but I might be back there next week if anybody has the number.
Okay, I'll look it up. I have a copy of Wordsworth and I can track it down. So we've got the longer Penguin edition, I think, and the shorter Penguin edition.
Well, there's one at 686.
686, okay. Any other editions I need to make a note of? All right, good. Good. You guys are getting really good at this reading, I'll tell you. All right. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and get an idea of how many pages we've read this time and last time. And then I'm gonna look at how many pages we have remaining. And
I've just looked it up more or less, Duncan. It's 10 pages more or less on my edition tonight, and it's going to be about 14 next week if we finish it.
So we read 10 pages tonight?
On my edition we did, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
so it would be wait to finish would be a bit longer than what we've read tonight, but just a few pages. So
okay.
I don't know what pace you'd like to pick more or less.
Yeah, that sounds like we can, we'll be close enough at this time. Next week, we would just continue to the end there. Yeah.
It's like a crescendo as well, I think, so you don't want to get it interrupted, maybe.
Yeah, not at the end. I mean, I think
Not
it's,
yeah.
I think it works okay right now. And, like I said, at least my experience is, it's really wonderful to read, but it takes a little more concentration than some of the other parts. Because of course, we're trying to figure out, where the chunks are. But some of
It's
you
more
really-
natural. It's more natural, I think, Duncan, isn't it? Although you have to pay attention, like there's no punctuation, you have to pay attention how to link words, but still the rhythm of it is much more natural. Don't you think so?
Yeah.
I'm finding it hard to read, and I want to relax and I want to enjoy it, but I'm finding it very difficult. Maybe I have to do it a few more times. This is rehearsal.
Yeah, no, this is like, this is, you may have noticed, I mean, I felt like had trouble, particularly in my first reading.
Yeah.
And I felt like I did a little bit better the first reading today, and I did a little better the second reading.
Mhm.
And some of you all were just like, had it
Yeah.
made so well. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
I hope I get there someday.
Me too. I want to, but I just can't find it, I guess, somehow. I just don't know it well enough, maybe. I don't know.
If you make little notes in your text as you go along, and then you'll know next time. Like if you take a word like wheel, you might think it's will, but then you find out too late that it was wheel.
Mhm.
So if you
I've
make
done that. I've done that. I marked my text. I even have some punctuation in there.
Okay.
But even so, I think it's just such a lovely piece of writing. I'm just not up to it yet, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, I even had a fantasy that maybe I would get a variety of colored highlighters,
Mm-hmm.
and I would listen to some of the recorded readers, and kind of have a kind of sleepy time, and then a bump in the emotion, use different color for that, and play with that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a fun idea. I like that.
It's
I've actually done that, Duncan. I've read it while listening to the readers, the RTD players. And one of the great things it gives you is the different characters, which if you read it cold, you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
But if you're hearing voices, you can. So I've underlined passages with different colors to identify the readers, and I found that extremely helpful. Now, there's only one voice in Penelope, so you can't do that there.
Well, one voice, but different moods.
Yeah.
One voice, different moods. So actually I think it's possible to do it. Now, whether I'm actually going to put the effort into doing it is a different question. But, Joyce, of course, particularly in his later years, used crayons all the time.
Yes.
And his creation. So we could say that following the guide that Joyce gave us.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a bit like a song or a piece of music we're singing along to in a way. And sometimes, you feel you have it inside you, and sometimes it doesn't come out. Sometimes it does. And then if you listen to other interpreters and professional interpreters, they might be wonderful, great performers, but none of them will be perfect, will be exactly what we have in our mind. So it's all attention to get there And the tension to get there is part of the experience of enjoying a work of art, I think, up to a point. So perfection is not there. And and it's always different. Every time we read, it's always different. And for me, it's big. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's a big gift to listen to you. And well, I adore Orla. I adore Orla, you know, but listening to you guys reading some bits is amazing. And it's not because of course, you know, it's funny, it's amusing, we can have a laugh about it, but some of the bits you're reading just make my day because it's a woman's voice. Sorry, and you're giving voice to a woman's voice so well.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges is breathing, because sometimes you just want to take a breath and it just goes on and on. So sometimes that'll stop me because I just have to take a breath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I encourage you actually to overall to slow down.
To stop galloping. I find it very interesting to hear men say it, because it was written by a man, and then you're listening to a man say it, and you're there going, "How did he come up with that?"
True. True.
I mean, that's and that's what's so interesting about it, because you're there going, "Of course he wrote that." And so, what was in his imagination? And
Mm.
He
was
was
he
getting in
going?
touch with his feminine.
Yes, but it's the feminine. You imagine it's Nora Barnacle, and then you go, he was going around earwigging to everyone.
Yeah.
Mm. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
And of course he and Nora attended operas and pantomimes and other singing performances all the time. And that combined with his classroom and teaching experiences. So I think what he was a master of was hearing sounds. And hearing the changes in sound. So, yeah.
And I wonder, was she breathless at some stage? You know, some stage she's breathless too, I think, because thoughts are kind of racing. And I remember the first time we finished it, Siobhan got to read the last bit, and she was, which she never is, she was almost breathless, and that added up to the, I want to call it a performance because it was even better than that, and we were sharing, so it was great to listen to her. But I think, you know, she Molly kind of speeds up at some stages, at some places in the
Mhm, mhm.
text. And Siobhan was just fantastic. Then I remember Sylvia finishing it too. So many
Mhm.
people finished it. We've been reading it so many times, and I finished it in Italian the first time we read it in Italian online. I finished it in Italian and I was crying because I always cry at the end. So it was a bit embarrassing. But because of the time when I was reading it and the experiences I was living in that stage of my life, it was just so meaningful to me. So it was a big gift, although I'm not a good reader. It was great. But you see, in Italian, it's more difficult because I think very few translations can get the Raven. So although, you know, there is in English, there is a language barrier for me, but I would say in Italian, it's more difficult because of that. Just the linking the words can get more difficult because you have a different rhythm, and Italian is a very different language to English. Very different. So it sounds musical, but what's the meaning of musical? We don't know. And there's a translation in Triestine dialect of this episode, which was done by a friend of mine, Fulvio Rogantin. And ironically, although he is not a professional translator, well, Terrinoni is a great translator, it sort of worked better from a rhythm point of view because of the there's less vowels at the end of the words. That's what gets in the way of the rhythm when you read in Italian. In Portuguese, it was you'll get there, Duncan. Portuguese, it's absolutely fantastic. But then I'm not, I don't speak Portuguese that well, so maybe.
I want to bring up the point. There's a couple of points here that, in a certain sense, this is a little bit like a foreign language, and it's kind of a truism among foreign teachers of some languages, a second language, that students actually make a jump in proficiency when they are tired.
Oh, yeah.
That actually the conscious, I want to do this correct mind gets in the way. And so when they're a little drunk or a little bit tired, suddenly an increase in fluency comes. And I give the old story of when I would go into the wine bar in Japan, and Japanese are overall very nervous about speaking English. Most Japanese are very nervous about speaking English. And for me as a foreigner to come in the bar, they were very nervous about it. And there was some halting conversation in the beginning. But after a little time passed and a few more glasses of wine, suddenly fluency increased all around. I spoke more fluent Japanese, and they spoke more fluent English.
Yeah, I find that I dream in Spanish. I don't speak it very well, but I can speak it when I'm dreaming.
Yeah.
Because I guess you relax.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be right and perfect.
Right. The censor and the critic is out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least calm down for a little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
So I have a question, and maybe somebody has an answer. So it sounds like Molly's mother left the family very early.
She says something about her mother having left.
Yeah, and I knew her mother had left, but for some reason this time I felt like her mother left like when she was very, very young.
Yeah, she grew up motherless, basically. Yeah, almost. Yeah. And that affected her.
Well, the way she says, my mother, whoever she was, might have given me a nicer name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the part where I went, oh, God, I guess her mother.
She wasn't spoken about at home, apparently.
But she knows your name.
She does. So I don't know. I'm not sure I have understood right, but I think she says somewhere, she would have been more protected if she had had a mother. Doesn't she? It's something like that. Like,
So I wonder
was-
about, excuse me, the woman who writes her the letters. Is she a maternal figure in her life? And why are they calling each other dog and doggerina? That's so odd.
Good questions. I don't have an answer to it.
What was it? Walker? And what's, and
Would you say, Sylvia?
You're
Mm,
muted, Sylvia.
You're muted, Sylvia.
what's, no, Walker as well. This Walker thing, maybe you came up against it before.
I think a wog is a slander for a Muslim, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's
the Oriental gentleman.
That's what, okay. We're the Oriental gentlemen, only it's slang. It says here in the annotated Ulysses slang for uncomplimentary slang for Arab or dark-skinned person.
Hmm.
So we're the Oriental gentleman would be sarcastic.
No,
It's not okay.
part of the British civil service way of talking.
Okay.
It's also used as Western orientated gentlemen,
Oh.
which might
Oh.
make a little more sense. And that would be the effect of the British Empire and, attracting people to the use of English and English culture and habits.
So it would be, like, for example, a North African who was an English speaker and had adopted some of the mannerisms of
Irish.
Westerners. Okay.
Newark is the one who told me that.
Okay.
Yeah, because of course that was actually, when it came to colonialization, what the English excelled at was using native peoples. So when you compare them to the other colonialist, my understanding is that the English actually had to use fewer English people to run their bureaucracy because they were so good at recruiting among native peoples, usually from minority groups. For example, in Africa, they would pick their civil servants not from the dominant culture within a geographic area, but they would pick a less dominant. So there would be this tension and a tendency for the less dominant African group to work for the English. If that makes any sense. Did I make any sense? I'm trying to make sense.
Well,
Yeah, that makes sense.
sounds good. I believe you.
Yeah, well, the point being that the English were, that was what they excelled at as colonists, was their ability to recruit among native peoples.
You know what
I
struck
was
me
also
about,
intrigued-
go ahead, so
Sorry, Brent.
what struck me about tonight's reading was that it reminds me of a woman. Her name is Camille Paglia. She's a Canadian professor. Wrote a book called Sexual Personae, I believe. And she talks about she comes from a large Italian family, and she spoke about how she learned growing up to deal with men herself. And this idea of how to deal with a man yourself on the sexual front is really huge in the chapter that we're reading. How to deal with a man, how to let him go so far and no further, how to guide him in a way that you want to go rather than he wants to go. all these issues, and Camille, she was saying in a YouTube video that she learned all this by being in a big family where she had lots of sisters and brothers, and you had to learn how to deal with men. Nowadays, of course, it's slightly different nowadays, where I think to a large extent, what we hear more of anyway nowadays is how the law and social media want to navigate these issues on behalf of women. Whereas in Molly's day, they had to navigate it on their own. And as we see, I think it was even a little bit hard for her, because wasn't somebody saying that she had to do it even without the help of a mother. So that to me anyway was a takeaway I got from it.
Right. Yeah, well, I majored in sociology and was interested in anthropology and social dynamics. And a very important book in my library, especially as a student, was a book called Weapons of the Weak. And it basically says, whether you're a minority in a majority culture or you're a woman in a male-dominated culture, that actually you as the minority or the woman have to be smarter. And have to be more observant, and that actually the dominance, let's say the males or the, let's say it's an English colonial culture, they can be pretty obtuse because they can rely much more on straight power and privilege. And so they're kind of dumb. But the people under the area of oppression, women, minorities, etc., really have to be smart and learn how to get the most and receive the least damage as a person without power and privilege.
And more observant as well.
More observant, exactly. It actually knows. So that's why, Molly would be so, would be able not only to notice these things, but would actually be able to state them, at least to herself. So.
And she's very aware. What struck me was as well this language thing. She remembers bits of Spanish, but it's very little, as Paul D said. It's very little she has left. But we know she says she had inherited her father's accent. So we can think she has an Irish accent, and it's probably not a posh Irish accent. We don't know, because she doesn't feel completely at ease. She feels judged because of her accent. Well, an accent may be telling where you come from. Well, especially at that time, but it's interesting because in generally speaking, in Italy, for example, an accent tells you where you come from. Stop. Okay, doesn't tell much about class or education. English is a more complex thing, I think, in this way, and it's intriguing for me to see how someone can perceive themselves in view of her own accent.
I would have thought now, going by the rhythm of the language, and when it was my turn to speak, of course, I spoke it in the way that I thought it would be, which comes natural to me being a Dubliner, and there are some of the words now that I would have said slightly different to other people too, because it was the way I imagined that she would say it. And one word that stuck out tonight was whore, that I couldn't imagine anybody Irish really saying whore. Usually they would say whore, so my opinion anyway, unless it's proved different, is my opinion is probably that she has a fairly working class Irish accent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You see, because she's a singer, and singers they're trained to sing in Italian, and they're trained to sing in Spanish, and she also sang in Latin. So she would have, okay, I think she might have sounded a bit like Emily. Is it Emily who usually reads with us?
Oh, yeah.
So he says she's really thick, but if she's Paul D says she doesn't listen to things. But if she's a singer and she can sing in all those languages, and she was well regarded, and she was doing really well till she was blacklisted, I think that she's not as thick as she pretends. And that's a womanly wile.
Good
I
point.
also think that she would have sounded, I don't know what she was like in her imagination in her head, but I'd say she had a Dublin accent, but it would have been educated.
Educated and yes,
Right.
okay.
And if she was
Right.
brought up, if her father was in the British Army and he was giving drilling instruction, and I mean, we don't know about the mother, but she was brought up in a strict Spanish way with the curiosity for exploratoriness, hanging out with girls. I think, I mean, it doesn't say where she was trained, but she was definitely trained to sing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Anyway.
curious, but she's not telling us about her training, is she? She's not telling us about where she learned to sing. Now I'm curious. Can we ask her? Okay, she's given us a lot of information, but this bit is not coming up, is it?
Yeah, no, there was nothing, at least I don't remember at this point much of that. But Aura's point is an incredibly good one, to the extent that there's actually an ex-opera singer in the United States who started a whole style of studying foreign languages by concentrating on hearing sounds in the target language first. And so, and he said that he started that back in the way of doing that because that's what opera singers have to do. They don't have to speak the language, but they have to hear the sounds. Otherwise, they just can't do it. So that's an excellent point, Orla. First time I've heard that.
And then her accent would have been, just as all of us, you speak in different accents depending on where you are and who the other people are. So I think when she's just talking about sex or thinking about something like that, her diction and her accent might be different than when she's thinking about performing. I think it would change.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like a telephone voice.
Yeah.
That you've got one voice for one thing and another voice for your regular behavior.
Right.
I also wonder, and I've forgotten what I was going to say, but I also wonder, was she, no, I won't say it. Sorry.
Oh, say it.
No, say it. Come on.
Be a devil.
I will say it. The fact that she was raised in Gibraltar and there's a mix of cultures in Gibraltar. There was the Spanish and there was the Arabic influence, etc. That this is probably one of the reasons that she was able to go on and become a singer. Now, I'm not a singer and I don't pretend to be, but I will tell you that my background, my father was from New York City and my mother was from East Texas. And I was raised on the island of Aruba, where I would hear Caribbean patois English, and I'm rather good at sliding back and forth. Good enough that sometimes I don't even I wake up and I realize, oh, I'm talking in my father's accent and rhythm now, because I happen to be dealing with maybe some people from the East Coast of the United States. Or I'm in Texas and I leave the city area and I'm out in the countryside, and I can slide into the patterns of rural Texans with those sorts of inflections on words, etc. So I assume Molly, was able to do the same, particularly since she's, I would assume, actually more emotionally in touch with things than I am as a male, and that she would be able to. That would be one of her sources for being a singer.
But you are doing well. You are in touch with feelings.
You're right.
No, no. I was also kind of thinking that Gibraltar is coming up as a place of wonders and an exotic place, but also a claustrophobic place where you can't find things when the amount of experiences is limited. So it's sort of a double-faced Gibraltar, although it's so poetic when she sort of evokes it. But, again, it's a restricted space. She lives her whole life in restricted spaces. But yet again, I like it about this weak woman who is conscious of the fact that she is weak and is using all her weapons and is being very careful about what she does and the reaction she's going to get from men. She's very guarded. But she's still looking for her pleasure, for her own pleasure. She is so sensual in a good way. Like she's still looking for joy.
Yeah.
And I would say looking for sex is limited. It makes the whole thing just. But no, she's looking for joy and satisfaction, and this is revolutionary, I think, given the time when the book was written. It is quite advanced, and I still find it very endearing. And I think a lot of people, a lot of women especially, have that ability and that yearn and that craving, and it's just I don't know, it's like life coming to a page in a way. Once again.
And I would like to point out, or once again probably, that this is actually a strong bond between Leopold Bloom and Molly Bloom. That Leopold is also relatively constricted.
Yes.
And has to live by his wits. Has to be very careful of how he proceeds. Excuse me.
And there's a very old idea too. It goes way back about the difference between the sexes, like back to primordial times, that the woman was like the producer of everything. And being the producer of everything, it was kind of like Pandora's box, where anything could be created, because women were creating everything. And then the idea was that then men came along, and what they wanted to do then was impose culture on all this creation, so as to bring about what they felt was some kind of some kind of order, I guess. And I think I see this in Ulysses, and also to a great extent in Finnegan's Wake too, that there's always that thread of, rather not to talk about all sorts of things, but just to talk about here about, say, Bloom and Molly, that Bloom is really interested in culture of things, culture, knowledge, science, art, you name it, and all that. And Molly's total emphasis is on the body, beautiful, you might say, that will create life from itself, you know. So in that way, then, just the two people alone encapsulate that huge, big idea about the difference between men and women.
The archetype.
Yes.
They incarnate
Yeah.
with the archetype.
Yeah.
I think that men have come a long way, though. I think that you're still giving yourselves a bad rap that you don't need to. Over the last 50, 60 years, I think made some progress, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful. And we will gather together next Thursday.
Yes.
Okay, I am gonna have to figure out, because I literally will not even, I'm not sure when I can actually post anything. So I may have to recruit somebody to make the announcement next week on the James Joyce readers, but we'll get that figured out.
Okay, look, Duncan, I'm here whenever you need me to post anything. I have no problem about that. So
Okay, so
whatever, we can post it on the group and then share it, and we'll manage somehow. We'll manage.
yeah,
And also,
yeah.
if you want to send me the links, the YouTube links, then we can share it to the group and then the River Run page. And
Yeah, probably
like,
either with
we're
you-
going to get around it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some experiments and figure out whether it's enough for me just to hand off the hosting to somebody else for them to be able to post on Facebook, or whether I'm gonna have to hand over the keys to my my Zoom account. All these things. There's always, at least I always find that there are workarounds of some sort. Nevertheless, I will figure out as soon as possible how to send the YouTube video so it can be pasted on Facebook by someone.
Yeah.
Larry, I'll probably appeal to you first.
Yeah,
on that.
yeah. No problem at all. Yeah. I'll do that with pleasure. Just remember, that guy that got you into trouble got the whole country here into big trouble.
I know. My troubles are nothing. My troubles are nothing. I actually find it a bit humorous and a good excuse not to look at Facebook for 2 or 3 days anyway. Just avoid it
I
all.
miss you. I miss you.
Be back.
You
I
were
like-
one of my favorites.
Well, I'm taking all the stuff that I would usually post on Facebook and I'm putting it in a file. So when they do release me on the world again, I can go back and make up for lost things.
On parole.
Anyway, I'm going to say good night for now, and that I'm looking forward to us gathering together to complete the Penelope section.
Mhm.
And it's been great. The
Yes.
reading-
Let me just say one thing. Now you're in Joyce's company because he was censored too.
There you go. See, now I'll have an even greater identification with James Joyce. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Good night,
Wonderful.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Buonanotte. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's see.